Blackpool's known for three things: rollercoasters, a mucky beach and the sesh. People like Stan Mortensen, Jimmy Armfield and Stanley Matthews had attempted to put its football on the map. Now it was the turn of Ian Holloway. This is Blackpool's Premier League year, a rollercoaster ride.
And it strikes it well. Oh, it strikes him absolutely beautifully.
Let's smash out a quick history on Blackpool FC. The club spent the majority of their professional existence, outside of like 3 years in the early 30s, in Division 2. Then Joe Smith comes along, a guy who has the name of an NPC, but an incredibly important one. He makes Blackpool a stable top-tier football club. 1947, the most famous English footballer, and smugly therefore the world, arrived at Blomfield Road. Stanley Matthews. A year later begins the trilogy of FA Cup finals. 1948, lost against Matt Busby's first successful Manchester United side. 1951, lost against Newcastle's last great domestic team. 1953, or the Matthews final, named not after the hat-trick scorer Stan Mortensen, but Stanley Matthews, who set up the goals in what remains Blackpool's ultimate crowning glory, a 4-3 win over Bolton. A year later, the most loyal of players pitches up at Blomfield Road, making his debut 2 days after Christmas '54, which is what most people call December the 27th. Yep, that's right, it's Jimmy Armfield. 1956, a Blackpool player wins the inaugural Ballon d'Or. No, it wasn't David Frith, Eddie Shimwell or Derek Lithgow, nor was it Jimmy Armfield, and certainly not Stan Mortensen since he'd buggered off to Hull. But of course, naturally, Stanley Matthews at the ripe old age of 41. Cristiano Ronaldo, eat that heart out. This in a year where Blackpool netted a record high of second place, but were largely inconsequential in a campaign where the Busby Babes of Manchester United claimed the league by 11 points. 1958 marked the end of Joe Smith's tenure at Blomfield Road. Ron Stewart takes over, but ultimately to diminishing returns. He does keep them in the top flight though. 3 years later, Stanley Matthews leaves. Yep, he's still going as he returns to Stoke City, his first club. 1967, Stewart was gone, with Blackpool on the precipice of removal from the first tier for the first time in 31 years. And then we enter the decade known as the 1970s, which starts with a sole season in the top flight, and even kind of a European trophy, emphasis on kind of, where they defeated Bologna in the Anglo-Italian Cup. Despite the goals of Bob Hatton and Mickey Walsh, they find themselves in the third division for the first time by 1978, ending the decade 19th and a potential slide into the bottom rung of the Football League, which they didn't waste time in reaching, getting relegated in 1981. They used to bounce between Divs 2 and 3 in the 70s, now they had regressed to performing the same trick between the 4th and 3rd tiers of English football as the 20th century became the 21st. And in this time, the club acquired quite the knack for winning the playoffs.
On the counter-attack. Simpson is screaming for it. Here is Simpson, surely 3-2.
Parker's got so much room. That is a wonderful goal by Keegan Parker.
From the penalties against Scunthorpe and the Leyton Orient come back to get out of the 4th division to their long-awaited return to the 2nd tier after 29 long years against Yeovil Town at Wembley, masterminded by Simon Grayson. This is where we join our story, as Latvian shareholder Valery Belikon had just promised the Blackpool public that the Tangerines would be playing Premier League football within 5 years. But before we bask into the light, we need to delve into the darkness, and with Blackpool, that could only mean one family, the Oystons. I promise I'll be quick. Eventual rapist Owen Oyston, let's get him off the screen for now, bought the club on May 31st, 1988 for a nominal fee and called himself a lifelong fan, although no real concrete evidence had ever been seen of that, and certainly wouldn't going forward. They did get the stadium renovated in the early 2000s, but they had also divvied over its improvements, and whilst they had been upwardly mobile on the pitch, there was probably more to be said surrounding Valery Belikon's investment from 2006 than there was for the backroom machinations of the Oystons. It was clearly a cash cow, not a football club, no matter which part of the litter was in charge and who was or wasn't in prison at certain times. For example, Blumfield Road's pitch didn't even have undersoil heatings in the 2010s. You could say they got extremely lucky by the names they had hired, Simon Grayson being one of them. He was the one who had finally dredged them out of the third tier and he'd consolidated their position in the Championship. Alright, they'd hardly blown away the competition, but they were in a safe and sound position of 16th place ahead of Christmas 08. All was relatively well. Then Simon Grayson left the Tangerines high and dry, leaving Blackpool for some random League One outfit that were calling themselves Leeds United apparently. Blackpool were taken care of by Tony Parks for the remainder of the season because that's what his job was, caretaker manager, going all the way from 16th and from 1.21 points per game to 16th and 1.22 points per game. Then enter Ian Holloway, just barely ahead of Ian Dowie. Holloway had been a barely noticeable footballer whose managerial career seemed to be heading the exact same way. He nearly got Bristol Rovers out of the third tier, but failed. He tried to keep QPR in the second tier, but failed, before he ultimately consolidated their position in what was now the Championship in 2006. He'd done the same with his somewhat local club Plymouth Argyle, where he'd make a name for himself for his antics outside of a match day, probably more so for his accomplishments on it. Nonetheless, his work afforded him his biggest job yet, Leicester City manager. The Foxes had suffered a tepid climb down from the Premier League and it was up to Holloway to send them back. He only succeeded in sending them down. So after a year out of the game, he was back in the saddle, this time with Blackpool. He wouldn't have inherited Charlie Adam had his 6-month loan not been turned permanent thanks to the stumping up of cash by Bellicon. Whilst he saw red in his first Seasiders match in February 09, Adam would quickly become the club's most important player, with Sir Alex Ferguson proclaiming his corners are worth £20 million alone. One of Holloway's first acts was to bring back fan favourite Brett Ormerod, a player who, if you cut him open, he'd bleed literal tangerines, and a forward who had scored in every possible league for the club, bar the top flight. The bookies, though, had no sentiment for that kind of thing, placing the Seasiders closer to the drop than promotion. Starting the campaign with 4 draws and only 1 win from their opening 6, they seemed to have Blackpool pegged completely correctly. That first win, however, wasn't too far away.
Have a spot kick. Up steps Charlie Adam. He's have plenty of the ball down that left-hand side. Well, that's a fine ball to the far post. Can Taylor Fletcher get there? No, he can't. He's still on the floor, though. And it's still bobbling around, and now he has a chance.
Aside from a loss at the Walkers Stadium, which would have hurt Ian Holloway more than most, Blackpool bounced back with triumphs over some strong teams in promotion contenders Newcastle, Nottingham Forest and Sheffield United. Nonetheless, it was results on the road from defeats against Bristol City and Crystal Palace, as well as draws in Swansea and Doncaster that kept Blackpool from serious automatic contention. And as the nights drew in, inconsistencies began to seriously threaten their playoff aspirations as well.
Charlie Adam beats Osborne. Pogatet's trying to get back, but Adam goes all the way.
After a 0-0 draw at Deepdale with local rivals Preston, the Seasiders had serious waves to make in the Championship should they even be considered for a playoff berth. Outside of their position on the outside of the top 6 were the several games in hand that most of their promotion rivals had over them. Not since mid-October had Blackpool been able to string together 2 league wins in succession, in spite of decent results at the Riverside and at Pride Park, as well as a victory at home to Watford. Holloway's side only went on a bit of a run with February's home displays against Borough and Reading. After a dismal beginning to March, picking up 1 point from 3 fixtures, Holloway's side began to win again.
Press for the equaliser, but of course on the break in stoppage time, DJ Campbell with the goal to confirm Blackpool's first win in 6 games.
Could have shown it, but things got worse for inside early in the second half. Stark shot hit the inside of the post as well by Stan
Watson. Some real confidence about Blackpool, and that's the reason why DJ Campbell.
The inconsistencies looked to be over when Blackpool travelled across the spine of the country and came back with 4 goals and 3 points from a successful trip to Scunthorpe. After 3 wins on the bounce, Blackpool began April with only a points deficit over Leicester City, of all teams. Their next away day at Newcastle was a free hit and was proven to be the case when they were eviscerated at the home of the would-be champions, shipping 4 goals. April 17th, however, would ultimately decide Blackpool's fate in their 43rd game as they hosted third place Nottingham Forest. 12 points the deficit on their promotion rivals. Charlie Adams' penalty and DJ Campbell's second half brace kept the Tangerines in the fight and might just have done some serious psychological damage to Forest. But still, Blackpool sat 2 points back on Swansea, who were by now the only viable team that the Seasiders could leapfrog into the playoffs. With 2 games left, Ian Holloway's side were handed the Championship's whipping boys Peterborough. DJ Campbell again on the dance floor with the goal in a tight 1-0 win. For the first time in months, thanks to Swansea's loss at Bramall Lane, Blackpool were back inside the top 6. A one-match shootout, Blackpool hosted 10th place Bristol City, Swansea hosted the similarly mid-table fodder of Doncaster and needed favours plus a win. They got favours from their nearby rivals as the Bristolians earned a point at Blumfield Road, but this Swansea team had just hit the rocks too soon into the season, collapsing to a 0-0 draw. They'd won just 3 of their final 13 matches to surrender the top 6. Blackpool hadn't finished so highly in the second tier since '77. Back then they weren't afforded a second chance at top flight football. Now they were 2 games away from Wembley and 3 away from the promised land of the Premier League.
Didn't fall for Southern, it has over Cohen. Still going with it. Feed up there for Everts. Southern is in!
The decision seemed to have paid off after 7 minutes when the striker opened the scoring.
And Campbell has scored! And Shaw has delivered it!
He scored within just 3 minutes of coming on to make it 2-2 and 4-3 on aggregate.
DJ Campbell! That's another one! Blackpool surely on their way to Wembley now!
A terrific hat-trick.
After one of the great Blackpool performances at the City Ground in the second leg, the playoff final in Cardiff City it was, with the winner going to the Premier League for the first time. The drought was 48 years for Cardiff and 39 years for Blackpool. The Tangerines in white that they wore in the 1948 Cup final against Manchester United, you know, that one that they lost. They would be hoping that the omens wouldn't be too strong at Wembley this time.
Whittingham. Oh, Chopra's found a little pocket of space. Chopra! And it strikes him well. Oh, he strikes him! Ledley's with a bursting run in behind. Joe Ledley! They've responded once and they're going the wrong way about responding again. Marshall not getting enough on it. Flicked by DJ Campbell. Blocked on the line, but bundled in! Here comes Coleman. DJ Campbell. Oh, might open up here for DJ Campbell. He lost his footing at the important moment. Overrun! For the first time, Blackpool are in front.
Ian Holloway demanded his Premier League team play like they had done in the Championship, full throttle and on the front foot. There would be massacres, there would be heartbreaks, but it would be his and Blackpool's football being played. To do so, he was only able to sign the likes of Craig Cathcart in defence, a midfield trio of Ludovic Sylvestre, Elliot Grandon and Mallory Martin, with Chris Basham working as either a midfielder or defender before Marlon Harewood pitched up for the attack on a free. The club operated a net loss of players despite being chucked £100 million by the Premier League. Crucially though, before the window was out, they got their hands on Wigan shotstopper Richard Kingson. They would only eventually be able to fill 24 of their allotted 25 playing spots. By the end of the window, Holloway was able to bring back DJ Campbell for his third spell at the club, as well as Matt Phillips and Luke Varney. They could have done without that or the constant bickering behind the scenes thanks to the non-payment of bonuses from the chairman, surprise surprise, down to the management and players. Nonetheless, it all kicked off in anger at the JJB or the DW or whatever acronym Wigan Athletic were now calling their ground. If that was dreamland, Ian Holloway and his team got a wake-up call 7 days later when they were posted to the Emirates and got slapped for 6. A week later they'd find a happy medium in front of their own fans, drawing 2-2 with Fulham before travelling up north to a fellow promoted side, Newcastle United. Despite being in the same boat, 32 points had separated them the prior campaign. Now the pair were on a more level playing field. The Premier League, however, wouldn't always be this triumphant, as a trip to the home of the champions proved 8 days later, as well as another London pasting at the hands of Chelsea. More disappointing were defeats against the likes of Blackburn and Birmingham in September and October, but among the torrent of defeats, perhaps the biggest win in Blackpool's recent history.
Charlie Adam in front of the cup, scores! Gary Taylor-Fletcher, it's sneaked through to Varney, it's a second goal for Blackpool!
Finally, in their 10th game, Blackpool had started to win in front of their own fans. After the 2-1 triumph over 9-man West Brom to begin November, Blackpool were still in the top half. Whilst it would be ridiculous for me to point out that they were as close to Champions League as they were to relegation, it was still a comfortable 9th place that they sat in. 9 days later came the defeat away at Villa Park, one that earned the club a hefty fine thanks to Holloway's team selection and series of changes to the team sheet. Even with the so-called weaker team which the manager put out, either in protest or because he genuinely didn't know his 11 yet, they very nearly got a point out of one of the league's finer teams. The club wouldn't be beaten again in 2010.
Room for the cross, got a flick on and a goal! DJ Campbell! He's got between two here. Can Blackpool finish it off? Phillips with a cross!
After 10 points from an available 12 to end one of the more glorious years ever at Blumfield Road, the Tangerines were flying high in 8th place. Whilst no longer keeping tabs on the Champions League, they did hold multiple games in hand on almost every team. And despite slumping to 2 league defeats and their second immediate cup exit of the season to begin 2011, an old familiar turned up to Blumfield Road on January the 12th. Yep, that was the double being performed over the not so mighty anymore Liverpool, keeping the Seasiders afloat in the top half of the table. Seeing only good, profitable signs at Blumfield, Ian Holloway was backed in the January market to the tune of Jason Punch and Andy Reid and James Beattie, all attacking signings for a team that probably could have used a defensive name. That was only proven in the coming weeks. Whilst fellow promoter club West Brom had been able to come from behind at the Hawthorns to sink Blackpool, more egregious versions of that were seen at home to Man United and away to Everton in a barren 5-match losing spell. First of all, the Tangerines held a 2-goal lead over leaders United with 18 minutes to play, only to lose all 3 points. Then with 14 minutes left on the clock 2 weeks later at Goodison, holding another lead against another gigantic club, Blackpool fell to pieces, losing by 2 goals as Louis Saha romped to 4. Suddenly, with 13 matches to play, Blackpool were not sitting so comfortably in the Premier League, only 4 points ahead of the drop zone, and now it was League Cup winners Birmingham City who had games in hand on them. They found some resolve, picking up another point against Villa before the visit of Spurs to Blumfield Road, which delivered another fine Premier League afternoon for the Seasiders. It acted as a lifeline as Brett Ormerod ticked off yet another division in which he had found the net for the Tangerines. The table had them 12, but the cut and thrust of the Premier League and its defeats against those at the bottom in Wolves and those at the top in Chelsea snuffed out the good vibe around the club, and it'd only get worse.
Now this is a great opportunity for Bobby Zamora, and Fulham are ahead. Nice take, nice touch. Diaby on the end of it, and Zopia on for Rodallega. Awful slip by Cathcart. It's Rodallega!
With 2 games to go, it was big trouble in little Blackpool ahead of the visit of Bolton Wanderers. Blackpool and Ian Holloway were officially in the relegation zone. A win would take them on to 39 points, a tally that, in the Premier League's history of 38-game seasons, would have been enough for survival 9 times out of 15. The last time that 39 points wouldn't have got Blackpool relegated was 8 years ago. Alternatively, if they didn't win, their fate would be effectively sealed should Wolves win at Sunderland, which they did 3-1. Not only did Wolves and Blackpool win on the Saturday, but fellow relegation rivals Wigan did so, and Blackburn got a point as well. It left one of the more exciting final day scraps for survival on the cards. Everything else had been confirmed in the division, all eyes therefore were on the bottom 6. Ian Holloway had stayed true to his beliefs. After all, they were the only team out of the bottom 4 to have reached double figures for wins all season. They were the only team in the bottom 8 to have hit over 50 goals that season. They also had conceded the most goals in the division, and that fact, as well as their goal difference, left things tantalising. A win would confirm safety given Blackburn's trip to Wolves. A draw couldn't confirm safety either, and even in an extreme afternoon, perhaps even a slender loss could keep Blackpool up as well.
Lays it back to Salgado, flicked in 1-0. Goes Craddock, drops it, Everton, oh, brilliant goal! Roberts, touch back to Hoylett. Hoylett into the bottom, could be 3, it's 3!
Oh, it just squirts away from Gardner, and Tottenham have the lead!
To the left of the wall, Hunt plays it square, here's O'Hara!
Figaro has taken on Wilkinson, and he's dinked it up for Rodallega, and Wigan are in front.
Here for Blues. Blocked the first time. Gardner's there. Birmingham are back in the
game. Aims wide at Fletcher, who rows well, and it comes to Hunt. He's bent it. Oh, Stephen Hunt!
And maybe there's a last goal at the other end, and there is.
All over at Old Trafford for a title-winning season for Manchester United. Blackpool's Premier League adventure is over too. They've been a wonderful asset to the Barclays Premier League, and Blackpool, we might see them back again in the future.
If you like this, we're doing a tour of great football stories from around Britain, from Glasgow to Burnley, Oxford to Dundee. Click it.